You are low. I cannot hear. Oh, I cannot hear what
Can
you
you
people
hear
are
us
saying.
now? Can you hear us now?
No, no.
But you just responded. Can you hear us now?
I can hear you personally, but I can't hear what is happening in the
Nothing has been
auditorium.
going on. We're just starting now.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yes, sorry for the delay, please.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you as a person. I can hear you.
Okay. Huh? Anyone you want to do? I will control your backlight. Okay.
Um, Good afternoon, everyone. We sincerely apologize for starting so late. I'm taking over Christopher Day. I'm a doctoral student in the University of Basel in Switzerland, and one of the presenter today, and I'm also talking as the chair. Unfortunately, some of the presenters did not get available, and then perhaps after my presentation, we can just turn to like a form of general deliberation. So today I welcome us to a very fascinating topic, and you all will agree with me that we are all here in and healthy as a result of our health system that is fine. Our body, soul, and everything about us is fine. So today's panel entitled Wellness, Health, and Medicine in Africa. We intend to talk about the health system, religious belief, and other cultural norms that has to do with health. We have interesting presenters, and I think it will be fine to talk about everything about them. So I start with myself. I'm talking of Christopher Day, a doctoral student from the University of Basel, Switzerland. And my research focuses on the intersection of indigenous knowledge, biomedicine, and maternal health in our British colony, that is in Yoruba land, located in West Africa. And for today, I'll be talking about our topic known as in women with herbs implants into therapy, traditional birth attendance, and authentic knowledge in Southwest Nigeria. Abenado Jose Asare in a work Bitter Root, Research for Healing Plants in Africa, was able to bring to fore medicinal plants that serve as veritable means of healing in Africa. She was of the view that plant specialists across the globe sought to transform healing plants in African countries into pharmaceuticals. An interesting aspect that was brought forth by Abeno was that there was conflict over medicinal plants, from stony recipe to toxic tonic, and then the unfilled promises of laboratory equipment. She was also of the view that there is a link between urban medicine and scientific knowledge. While drawing on public available record and extensive healing interviews with traditional healers and scientists in Ghana, Madagascar, and in South Africa, Abeno was able to establish that urban medicine and pharmaceutical chemistry have simultaneous and overlapping histories that cut across various geographical locations. Many thanks to Abeno for providing insight into healing plants in Africa. But my presentation is a departure from what Abeno has established. For me, I try to look at how indigenous knowledge serve as veritable to envisioning African presence. So I try to look at, for the presentation, first I try to look at the study area, which is Yoruba land. Yoruba land is located in the western part of Nigeria, which is in West Africa. And then I try to look at the group called Yoruba land, the Yoruba set of people. Just like other African communities, they have an established cultural system, and their thoughts resonate with so many anthropologists that culture is inseparable from the health system of the people. Then for the theoretical framework, I try to look at various theories so far that have talked about the engagement of Africans with their health. And from it, I try to look at the structural approach and other studies, other theories that try to focus on the experiences of the people in an attempt to engender their health. Then I try to look at a different theory known as the ethnoscience theory that looks at culture from a scientific perspective. The choice of an ethnoscience theory is that it stimulates understanding of how people develop different forms of knowledge and belief, and as well focuses on the ecological and historical contribution that people are giving. So ethnoscience theory is really important to this presentation, in that it's position indigenous knowledge as a veritable means for envisioning African presence across time and space. Then I also try to look at the gap in literature, and so far I was able to establish that various scholars have, discussed African contributions to global health and as well as African presence within the context of legacy of colonial medicine, among which include Megaban and Penicillin. Then another aspect that I also try to look is that Africa and the African world, rather, in terms of maternal health, have been sites for European Living Laboratory, which I'll still talk more about that. Then I argue that Africans have contributed immensely, to global health in terms of indigenous knowledge. That is one of the major arguments of Abeno Dove that I earlier cited. She was able to look at the various medicinal plants that Africans have been able to use, and make them in terms of drug production. Then I also argue that such African presence have often gone unacknowledged, or sometimes they are actively silent. Then another Ifa, the Yoruba traditional religion. Many of them get trained in Yoruba land, and from there they come over to the US. And interestingly, a number of them are even more devoted to the Ifa worship, unlike some other Nigerians, but there is still more to do. I hope this.
Yes. Okay, then thank you, that was really interesting. Two questions. One is a kind of follow-up on that. You mentioned some Yoruba examples there, and I'm curious if you thought about this in terms of other contexts, like the knowledge of traditional births in some other countries, for example. And my other question is if you could expand a little bit on some of what you think the knowledge is coming out of your research, in particular that has the potential to be very powerful or useful in improving maternal health.
Thank you. But I listened to understand your first question. Maybe you can recall that.
Well, so in terms of integrating indigenous knowledge into biomedicine, you mentioned a couple of cases where that's being done in terms of Europe. And I was wondering, more generally, if you're aware of or have thought about what that looks like beyond this one group of people. in other African contexts, since you're talking about re-envisioning or envisioning these things?
Thank you. Kind of the first one, integrating Yoruba knowledge. In across the United States of America, we now have South America, we have Salvador, Brazil, and some other countries that they are well versed in Yoruba, another Caribbean, that they are well versed in Yoruba knowledge, and many of them are beginning to integrate this into their health system. Then for my my own study on maternal health, there have been cases of proverbs, songs, incantation, and stories emanating from Ifa poetry that focuses more on the local knowledge. During the course of my presentation, I was able to talk about a song that is used to eulogize Oshun, who happens to be a female fertility goddess. So the song goes just that Oshun, the water serves as a healing potential, not just for the revitalization of maternal bodies, but it helps to make tumors whatsoever. This is because the maternal health is being looked beyond Western laboratory. We have some what we call the malevolent forces, and this set of people were known to be responsible for the incidences of maternal mortality. So, for instance, when a woman is pregnant, it is essential for her in African culture to go through what we call divination. Divination is more or less like the Western laboratory. So from there, she gets to understand whether she belongs to a spiritual association that she needs to appease for her to have a safe delivery. Believe me, many of African women in diaspora that perhaps encounter miscarriages or incidents of maternal mortality, this is because they fail to go back to their roots. So it is high time we went to our roots to discover and the type of person we are, the type of spiritual association we belong to, and then how we can appease such people in order to have an engendered maternal health. I hope I answered that.
Yes, I have comments and maybe it's a question, but I think it's important to note that for, I don't know, maybe a couple decades now, I think it's the New England Journal of Medicine that publishes every year the number of people in America that die as a result of the medication that they are given to that they are given by their doctors in the hospital. And I think that says a lot about plant medicine and how it is more gentle than the kind of approaches that the biomedical industry takes in terms of, a lot of most medications in the Western pharmacopoeia uses plant medicine, has plant medicine at its base, and in order to turn it into patented medicine, they have to change it. So they take just the active ingredients and then turn that into something, and it's causing a lot of damage to people. And I think that it's important to note that in in many ways, the biomedical profession industry here is captured by big pharma. And so this subjugates indigenous medical knowledge. And you know, in many ways, I mean, if you look at South Africa, but in other places, particularly where large areas of land is kind of given away or sold to non-Africans, a lot of that plant medicine, African plant medicine, becomes part of other cultures' pharmacopoeia. And so I'm just wondering if you looked at any of that in your work, if you're kind of aware of that, and that yeah, I just think that alone is a super argument for indigenous knowledge.
And thank you for that, for the beautiful insight. And I've tried to look at that during the course of my lecture research. And I also forgot to mention something that is a bit related to what I'm doing, and that has to do with the medical vet system. That is the integration of the local the integration of traditional vet attendant into the Western medicine. So both of them are working hand in hand in order to maintain their maternal health. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting presentation. Thank you so much. It opened my eyes to many aspects of things that living in the United States, growing up in the United States, I'm not aware of. I think something that I read recently that was very interesting, I thought it was in a booklet on the Cubans' involvement in Angola during the war there. The Cubans went there to help the Angolans in the War of Liberation. And one of the things that a Cuban medic there said was he was so appreciative of his experience there working with medical professionals in Angola who practiced plant-based medicine. He said it opened up a whole, and the Cubans are very well versed in using plant-based medication in their country, you know, because of the embargo, they can't do anything else, you know, but he said he was so appreciative of it, and it made him a much, much better doctor. You know, just one thing on what the sister said, big pharma in the United States is a very, very cruel thing. But unfortunately, their sole motivation is the whole profit motive. You know, all you have to do is look at what went on with the whole opioid epidemic here in this country, you know, not driven by anything except making a dollar, regardless of, you know, and I think that in other countries like Cuba and Africa, you know, it's that lack of the profit drive that changes what medication and medicine is, you know, and it's only through that I think we can actually begin to find a road forward to what is in our interest, you know. Just one thing, if anybody wants to find out more about any of the stuff they have, I'm at the Pathfinder Press table in the exhibition hall. I think it's table 144, you know, and I invite everybody to come by, you know, and look at our books that we have, not just on the involvement of the Cubans in Angola, but also around the whole Ebola epidemic, what the Cubans did there. It's just very, very inspiring work, you know, and it shows you when we put the profit motive behind us, you know, what we're capable of doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the suggestion. Then I think my colleague, Susan, she's also an expert on the African medical history, and she works during the war period and during the Civil War rather. So I think that might interest us so much. Perhaps you might want to include it. Or do you have anything to say to that?
I'm interested in why you use the term indigenous knowledge, not local knowledge, not vernacular knowledge. And I'm wondering if it's a question of conceptual choice. Not traditional knowledge, as we have it used earlier. And the other question I had, I think a lot of been spoken about, and I'll just rephrase or reiterate. That you talk very excellently about the localization of medical knowledge production and exchange in Southwest Nigeria. But I wonder if at the point of your research, you have encountered more specific evidence of cross-cultural dissemination of what you call indigenous medical practices, especially with neighboring Nigerian states, but also beyond the African continent. And the ways that that knowledge, especially you emphasize mental health and all the plant-based medicine that comes with that, how they are shaped modern medicine. Because I think that the concept of circulation and exchange by itself is sort of a prevention.
Thank you. My choice of indigenous knowledge is just to encapsulate what, like, the kind of knowledge that is handling to a particular community. So I can just say local or perhaps traditional. So what I meant is just like this kind of knowledge is emanated from this set of people. So I wouldn't say like they have the rights to such knowledge, and they are the sole author of the knowledge. So by saying indigenous, I try just to like use the kind of knowledge to identify the Yoruba people which I described. Then on the other question that has to do with maybe I've been able to understand more on the indigenous knowledge of neighboring community. First, for the eastern part of Nigeria, the Igbo people, they also have their own indigenous knowledge and medical system. Then some scholars have also explored that. Among them is Oyedepo Williams. She has been able to tell us more on the although not on the larger scale, on the kind of plants and herbs that are being used for during pregnancy and reproduction. And for Abenado that I cited earlier, in our work, Peter Root, the search for healing plants in Africa, shall be able to exploit various healing plants in Madagascar, in South Africa, and in Ghana. So I think that more have been done, and then which I said earlier that the only gap I'm trying to fill is that none of these scholars have been able to situate indigenous knowledge as a tool for envisioning African presence. I hope I answered it.
Thank you so much.
I must say very much, well done for taking on, the panel meant for like 4 people, and has given us the time to throw so many questions at you. So well done. And thank you for the powerful presentation. So I have 2 questions, probably because I'm working on men's reproductive health. So I was wondering whether you came across, male midwives, and how did that affect anything? Then the second one, how did the midwives, manage complications during child? Can you just, we know how the biomedicine do it. So how do they do something, like that?
Can you go to my slide, number 9? I start with the aspect of male midwives. In African culture, just like in Yoruba culture, just like other African culture, there is so much emphasis on who or what constitutes rather the female body. And I'm sure you've done your work on the nakedness. Yes. And so unlike in Western societies, in Yoruba land, it is believed that a woman was not exposed the body. A woman was dressed fine, like cover her body. So all this knowledge are also tailored to reproduction. First, the aspect of birthing system are vested on women. Women have the rights to also look at, the bodies of other women. Going down this memory lane, in Europe, we have this surgeon known as I try to remember Simeon, and then in the early years she was experimenting with black female bodies. And from there was a contest on why he has to experiment black female bodies. So from there was a gradual change in what constitutes male midwives, even in Europe. So coming down to Africa, and specifically Yoruba land, there are no male midwives. Rather, we have male herbalists.
Yes.
That focuses on reproductive health.
Yes,
These
that's what
male herbalists are known as Ezekiel. And like the man, his name is Ifayemi Omotola. He focuses on gynecological problems and any reproductive health, female reproductive health. So when midwives are having problems, maybe during the course of divination, just like that it's not all women engage in divination. The first thing they do is to go to Fayemi. The Fayemi is now in the right position to establish claim about what they must have tried, the problem they are trying to encounter. However, during the course of my discussion with Fayemi, they are always present during child delivery, but they are not allowed to enter the delivery room. For male midwives, they are always seated like somewhere and perhaps appeasing the gods if there is need to offer rituals or sacrifices. So, in one respect, it is good to suggest that there are male midwives, but the kind of responsibility or their duties rather is a bit secluded because they are not permitted to enter the delivery room.
Hi, another question. I should also maybe say, so I work a little bit on the integration of biomedicine and traditional medicine around childbirth and newborn. And so one of the interesting things for me has been that a lot of that work has been involved both talking to midwives and traditional birth attendants and seeing where they find each group find a place potentially in training for each other's perspectives. And I'm just curious about what similarities and differences might be in Southwest Nigeria, and if, for example, if you talked about like biomedical education in the US. Have you talked to people, for example, involved in midwifery training in Nigeria, and what has that looked?
Thank you. The basis of my presentation is more like an integration of both, but this integration had already started like during the colonial period in Nigeria. But after colonialism, we now have what we call travel, medical, birthing system and the likes. But I established that the place of culture cannot be overemphasized when it comes to reproduction or motherhood. That is why we need women, traditional birth attendants, that know this set of people, that understand their culture, and that that can to find solution to their to any complication, knowing fully well or trying to look at it through the lens of culture and not just laboratory and the likes. Okay,
Yeah, I would just be curious a little bit more about, what you mean by culture. And, I mean, you mentioned that example of the spiritual song, but I'm also curious what other elements that we experience that, traditional birth attendants bring, or local midwives bring, that would be a part of culture.
Okay, what local work?
What local midwives, what traditional birth attendants, what else is meant by culture apart from the spiritual? So like, for example, in Uganda, one of the things that a lot of the traditional birth attendants talk about is the experience of the birth, right? And what that entails, right? And some of the risks, both cosmological as well as medical, of going to the hospital. And so I'm curious, like, beyond just sort of entity and culture, what kinds of things are going on as well that are important that traditional birth attendants are offering.
Thank you. Aside the spiritual association that I talked about, we also have this people known as witchy, which are also predominant in this part of the world. But their own the debate on that is like a two-edged sword, because some believe that they either play both positive and negative aspects of it. So aside the witches too, there is what's we also known as faith, F-A-T-P, in Yoruba culture. It is believed that while we're coming from the spiritual world, we as human beings, we have already chosen the kind of food or the kind of the number of children we are going to have, the riches and the likes. But while making such a decision, we make the decision unconsciously. Then when we get to the universe now, we try to alter it. So in order to do this, there is now need for us to go through intermediaries like herbalists and the likes in order to appease the gods and just to appease the gods. Another interesting aspect is that culture can never be overlooked. You can't push like pushing it aside. No, there's a place of culture, there's a place of health, there's a place of personalization and organization. So we need to identify that first. For instance, when a woman is pregnant in Yoruba culture, she's not allowed to engage in night crawl, like walking around in at night, because it is believed that there are some set of children, spirit children known as people in Yoruba language. So this set of children were known to always go around, especially during scorching sun, and they have the potential to drive away the photos and then to penetrate into the womb of the woman. So it is always advisable for a woman in Yoruba land to always go about with a very like a stone that is being tied around her waist. So in the belief that when such children are coming, then the photos we have the capacity to like fight back. And another thing has to do with the pain, what people say is pain that is being used in the scientific laboratory of our medical doctors. It is believed that a woman must put, a pregnant woman must put the safety pin around about her in order to prevent such women. So if all these are being adhered to, there will be no incidences of maternal mortality. Then another has to do with when a hunter, if the wife is pregnant, she's not permitted to hunt any kind of animal whenever it goes on the hunting mission. This is because it's believed that some animals might, transform to the wife, and any attempt to kill such an animal translate to him killing the wife. So if all these norms, if they are being adhered to, then there will be no incidences of human disability or violence.
Okay, sorry. So just to build up on that and to, answer a bit of what you said, I think it's important to know that culture is also, it's basically a vehicle of your realities. You understand? So culture adapts to your reality at that point. So I guess, like you mentioned in the case of the Ugandan woman, what she probably is trying to say is that it's probably a codification of antenatal rules, that have been transmitted from generation to generation over time. So you're coming for divination, but then you also have these antenatal rules that have been codified spiritually, but to adapt to your realities so that, you know what is good for the fetus, it's good for yourself.
To finally add to what you said, generally, I would like to add that one of the reasons pregnant women generally, speaking out as Yoruba women, right? So one of the reasons Yoruba women prefer to use the option of indigenous birth delivery, right, is also because when they do that, when they give birth through that process, they avoid cesarean sections. So yeah, so they don't use the knife to deliver a baby, and in some cases, or I should say in most cases in the pre-colonial and even early post-colonial period, they know how to maneuver, bridges, baby bridges, child bridges, so that they turn the head of the baby, and they're able to deliver the child safely like that. So I think I read it when I knew I think about last year or so, that women usually prefer that, so that when even complications of delivery comes up, they invite the experienced, most cases the aged women, who would use their hand to scan the position of the baby and go inside and turn it. Then when they do that turning, they're able to deliver the baby. So that's one of the reasons it thrives till now. Yeah, I just thought of adding that to the conversation.
Okay. I think there's someone online who is raising up his hand. Hello.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Yes,
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Pelumi Folajimi is the name.
Yes, please. We can all hear you.
I was enjoying the presentation, the questions, the conversation. I did not intend to raise my hand until there was a question asking if the presenter had seen a male midwife before. Then I decided to intervene. That question compelled my intervention. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with, I'm glad the presenter used the word herbalist. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with Ifayemi Elebuibon, a famous diviner, a famous Babalawo and worshipper of Oshun. One of the important lessons I learned from Ifayemi Elebuibon, the Babalawo, is that, of course, he was asked a question and he responded to that question. The question was, is there any difference between Onishegun, Babalawo, and one other concept in Yoruba tradition? And then the response of Ifayemi Elebuibon is that in the olden days, in ancient times, there was no separation of power among these, separation of power. I mean, division of labor, precisely. Among all these things that we now call Onishegun, Babalawo, and one other concept. The explanation of Ifayemi Elebuibo was that in ancient times, Babalawo was responsible for all these things. Babalawo had the power, the function, both the spiritual and social function of being a midwife, being the priest, being everything that has to do with the spiritual well-being of the society, and in fact, the health of everybody in the society. So the Babalawo was the medical doctor that we have in contemporary times. The Babalawo was the midwife, whether male or female. The Babalawo were usually male. So the male Babalawo was expected to midwife a pregnant woman. So the functions of Babalawo are huge and cannot be quantified. Is the priest, is the spiritual leader, is the one who performs rituals for the incoming king, is the one who performs rituals when the king dies. He performs rituals when an Abiku child dies. He performs rituals when there is tragedy. He performs rituals when there is happiness. So the Babalawo has a lot of functions and duties in Yoruba tradition. That's my intervention, and that's my contribution to this debate. Thank you.
Thank you
Of course, permit me, I will say this on a note of apology. I'm not saying this to advertise any event, but since the presentation is about Yoruba oral tradition, Yoruba healing system, and of course, the presenter addressed the subject of Babalawo, the subject of traditional healing. Maybe it is appropriate, and I hope Professor Said Aderinto permits me. In the next 2 days, in the next 3 days, on Sunday, December 3, Toyin Falola, the Toyin Falola interviews will host Ifayemi Elebuibon, and Elebuibon is expected to talk for maybe 90 minutes, if not 2 hours, and then the audience members will be permitted to ask him a series of questions, as many questions as the members of the audience have. Ifayemi Elebuibon is a diviner, is a Babalawo, is a priest. If anybody has questions regarding that, the person or the people may attend that event, which we hold on Zoom. You are permitted. I'm sorry to provide that information here.
No,
I don't want to bring in Toyin Falola, but because we are saying that, and I hope Professor Aderinto will permit and forgive me for that.
Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To respond to what you just said now, concerning the male hegemony in herbal practices. If you look at it from the far poetry, when Olodumare sent forth his messengers to the world, to come and inhabit then there was issue with the place of Oshun, because she was the only female among them. Then she was sidelined. So while she was sidelined, there were issues, like there were problems in the universe. And there's a particular Ifa poetry that goes just that women no longer menstruate, women no longer have their own babies on their own, and then there was no rain to water the cassava and everything. So what they did was to go back to Olodumare, being the god, and then they asked what the problem was. And he told them that this is because they were able to sideline Oshun. So back to your question on the aspect of herbalism or who constitute a midwife. So far from what I've read from the archive and my interaction with herbalists, just like what I've said so far, there are male midwives, but many times they were not permitted to be in the delivery room. Then they serve as every parent to the to midwives rather, and in order to engage in rituals, sacrifice to appease the god. Then archival sources have also made mention of Akere, a particular woman that was empowered by Yemeja to give children to women and to engage in successful birth. So I'm not trying to argue, but I still stand that the duty of child delivery has been the sole responsibility of women, but they were ably supported by May Babalawo, known as the SCPL.
Thank you so much. Any more questions, contributions? Okay.
You know, I'm familiar with another version of the story you are telling about when the Orisha first came to the world. They were mostly all male. They were all male Orisha, and then there was a Oshun among them, and the male Orisha, like you said, left out Oshun, and Oshun, having the power of the Ajay, was able to, what do I say, subdue the work of any work that the male Orisha tried to do. Oshun was able to stop that. And so when they went back to Orun to talk to Olodumare and said, you know, none of our stuff worked, and Olodumare said, well, who did you leave out? And they realized that it was Oshun. And so this is, how should I say, an essay within the Ifa literary corpus to show that in Ifa religion itself does not exclude women, but it is the men themselves that exclude the women, and they have to pay for it. And the other thing, you know, I don't know about ancient times or whatever, but I know that the Babalaos work together in groups, and the Babalao is not necessarily an Onisegun, and an Onisegun is not necessarily a Babalao, but they can. So it's the same thing in Benin as well. In Voodoo, you have some people who are Babalao or Idanifa, and they are herbalists at the same time, or an herbalist who just do the herbs and does not do divination. But everybody works in a kind of community to bring the well-being of the devotee or supplicant to the community, and I just think that's kind of important to know in response to the gentleman.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. So can we at the bottom?
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah.
Bring the final.
Should we bring the panel to a close? Okay. Yeah, I guess we can do that.
Thank you very much for your time.
Well done.
Selection, we so much appreciate that. And thank you for attending this panel, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you for coming in. Great job. Yeah.